Thank you very, very much. Careful is not my middle name. It's okay. I have many middle names. Many middle names. Careful is not one of them, but it's okay. But I'm ready for a tea. Actually, out of a cola. So, I wanted to turn this on 1 second. If you are watching us online, please say hi. Why is this not on? 1 second. Let's put this on. There we go. 1 more second. There we go. You see me online? You see my hands there. 1 second. We're going to have an amazing class tonight. So if you're watching, please say hi. So I can see you and I can say hi to you. And before we start the class, we'll say good evening to everyone watching. Should we move this closer, but it's okay. You see me? Corrine says hi from Siberia. Wow, Siberia. And Andrea says hi. Andrea's not so cold. Andrew, where are you again? L'chaim baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shehakol nihiyeh b'dvaro.
It's cold up there in Siberia.
In Siberia, it's cold. She's in Michigan, but she feels like it's oh, she said from warmer than Siberia. Well, they said from Siberia. Okay, good. She's from warmer than Siberia. It's freezing. It's not that cold. I'm going to be sweating soon. Have a tea. Warm your insides. I sweat. It's okay. I start teaching. I'm already sweating. It's okay. We got a crowd watching online, which is great because it's going to be an amazing class. So thank you for saying hi, Andrea. Andrew's in New York. It's pretty cold there. Shalom, Alice, watching us from Baltimore. I'm glad you're with us. And Shira Erev Tov from the west coast of Florida. Why is this moving around? I don't know. If you're watching on Chabad.org, please say hi. So we can feel like you're with us. This way. There you go. Okay. Gail, good evening, Gail. Good evening to everyone in the room. Good evening to you. Take one more drink of our tea. L'chaim Michael. L'chaim to everyone here in person. L'chaim. It's going to be in a second. It'll be class time. Here we go. Okay. Okay, ready, ladies and gentlemen? Okay, good evening. Good evening, showtime. If you're watching, I hope you can hear us loud and clear. Make sure they can hear us. Is there a rating? Rated R? Marsha's rated R. Rated, who said rated rabbi? Rated R for rabbi. Rated R for rabbi. Restricted, parent supervision. Hopefully Marsha will come. Okay, so good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Tonight's learning is in the memory of Yitzchak ben Yosef, the Shamash and Elevation. We are going to be continuing the fascinating story of Queen Esther. The more I learn and the more I prepare, I can never finish learning. Just so you know me, I'm never done. I never was ringing the bell. 1 second. Yeah, someone's ringing the doorbell. No, 1 second. I don't know why they. We're back. If you were watching Chabad.org, we're back. Okay. Good evening, Erev Tov, Lori. Okay, now I got some comments on Chabad.org, so now we're streaming live there too. So if you're watching on Chabad.org, say hi. Good evening, Lori. Okay. You got it? Michelle, perfect. Thank you. Appreciate that. So, my friends, the story of Esther is absolutely fascinating. And we're going to today focus specifically on the most amazing act of heroism and of sacrifice that Esther does, which, as I mentioned last Shabbat, and I didn't want to talk about it last week, but the greatest heroism doesn't happen in public. It actually happens in private. The sacrifice of Esther, we today, in hindsight, and with the commentaries and rabbinic explanations, know a little bit more about how great was her sacrifice. And tonight, you're going to walk away from tonight with a whole new appreciation for what she was willing to do for the Jewish people. And what she was willing to do because of her loyalty to Mordechai, who was not only her husband, but the Moshe of the generation, the leader, and as in unbelievable loyalty to Mordechai, what she does, that really defies logic. So let's go straight to the story. Esther, as you already know, is the queen of Persia, right? We talked last week. She was chosen despite her wishes not to be chosen. Esther is chosen to be the queen of this man she has no desire to be with. She was forced because the king was desperate after 3 years of unsuccessfully searching for a wife. He put out an edict in Shushan, anyone that's found hiding from him will be put to death. She was taken to the palace, and although she's intimate with her husband, Achashverosh, and they even already have a child together. By the time of the Purim story, you don't read this in the text of the Megillah, but actually she's already gave birth to a boy whose name is, anyone remembers? Darius. Very good. Good guy. Yes, good. Darius II. Darius II. Daryavesh in Hebrew. Daryavesh, or Darius II, is the one who will give permission for the Jewish people to build the second temple. He is the successor of Achashverosh. If you remember, I mentioned that Achashverosh saw prophetically in the stars that his successor, who would take over his crown, would be a Jew, which is part of why he hated the Jews so much, because the worst thing to know was that a Jew would take over his kingdom. He didn't realize he would end up with a Jewish wife and he would have Jewish kids. So his son, Darius, would be the one to allow the Jews to take over the land to return back to the land of Israel and to build the Beis Hamikdash. So she already has a child. But during this entire time that she is intimate and married to Achashverosh, the Talmud describes it like earth. When someone wastes their seed on the earth gets no pleasure from it. And she was a very unwilling participant in the intimacy of their marriage and their relationship. She was intimate like a piece of earth that took no pleasure. He did what he wanted with her, and she was considered as if being raped each and every single time that they were intimate during the course of the 4 years that happened in the 7 years total. In the story, till this point, she is against her will being forced because she'll be killed, and we already know that Achashverosh is not a husband you play around with. The last wife died, or died is a nice word. That would not be an accurate assessment of how she ended her life. She was killed by her jealous, drunk husband. So she didn't have a lot of choices in this marriage, and she still has a dream and a hope of one day being somehow miraculously freed from the palace and being able to return back to her husband. And I already established last week, when a person is raped, that is not considered adultery, and you are allowed to continue living with your husband after the rape because it was against your will. It was not something that you chose to do, and the marriage can continue. Good evening, everyone that's watching. Thank you for the comments. Michael and Carmen and Eugene, thank you. Now, I want to mention something else that I mentioned last week. I wanted to go back to the end of the class, but we ran out of time. Besides to the fact that Esther is living in this palace with the king she hates, and in literally a state of imprisonment. I mean, she's in a very fancy royal palace, but she's literally a prisoner in the palace with no free will whatsoever, literally no free will. It's also a very hard time for the Jewish people. Assimilation is very high. Anti-Semitism is very high, which is encouraging assimilation because the Jews are convinced that if they would only assimilate and be more Persian, or be more Persian than the Persians, you can extrapolate to today's times, then the assimilation, then the hatred and the anti-Semitism would go away, would dissipate. Because Jews then thought, as many Jews today think, that the cause of anti-Semitism is something that we do, and somehow we're responsible for the hatred of the non-Jews against us. And if we would only be less hate-inducing and less in your face and less Jewish, then the hatred would go away. So many of the Jews thought, and the Jews are spiritually at a very low place. But it's worse. Why did Achashverosh make the party that is the beginning of the Megillah? If you remember from last week, Achashverosh made a calculation that the famous prophecy of the prophet Jeremiah that had been twice given to the Jewish people, once verbally and once written to in letters to the Jews that were exiled in Babylonia and in Persia, that not to worry, 70 years and they'll be redeemed, they'll be free, they'll go back to Israel. And according to his calculation, it was 70 years from when Nebuchadnezzar had reconquered the land of Israel. If you remember, Belshazzar had conquered the land twice. The first time he conquered it, but then the Jews fought back. The second time he conquered it was when he would eventually destroy Israel a few years later. but because he had conquered the land of Israel, and this will lead to and taking many exiles, including many of the Jews, so including Mordechai, he thought that this is the end of the promise of the prophets. The prophets are false. The prophecies are lies. Redemption will not come. And he felt safe making a feast with the clothing of the high priest on him, with the vessels of the Beis HaMikdash, of the temple. And guess what happened? You know what happened? Nothing. When Belshazzar made a feast on what he thought was the end of the 70 years of the Jewish promise of redemption, what happened to Belshazzar? What happened? He was killed that very night, correct. So Belshazzar, the Jews weren't saved, but Belshazzar was killed. His kingdom ended. That very night that he celebrated the destruction of the Jewish people was the night that he himself was killed. So when Achashverosh took the risk of making this party on the end of 70 years, he was a little afraid. And guess what happened to him? Nothing. Which proved that the prophecy is over. Prophecy was false. Nothing would happen. The God of the Jews is gone, is forgotten, is useless. It's a scam. It's a Baba Maisa that their mothers told them. There is no God of the Jews. Their God has abandoned them. Their God is weaker than the God of the Persians. Maybe the God of the Babylonians, but the God of the Persians, there's nothing that can stop him. And Achashverosh thought that way. The non-Jews thought that way. And sadly, many of the Jews thought that way. And the reason why I'm repeating this, because I'm about to tell you the story of Esther making the unbelievably bold decision to go to the king, which you all know the story, but I want you to appreciate the unbelievable sacrifice here. It's so important to realize the context in which this is taking place. It is an unbelievably dark time for the Jewish people. The concealment of God at this time is not just, we all know the famous teaching that God's name is not mentioned in the Megillah because God was concealed. If you know the history, God is really, really, really concealed at this time. God seems to have been beaten by the God of the Persians, who have celebrated the end of the 70-year prophecy with no repercussions whatsoever, and they got away with it. And what did the God of the Jews do? Nothing. Seemingly, the God of the Jews no longer exists. You have to realize that the Jews are living in a real dark time. A real dark time. And Esther has this darkness more than anybody else. Because everybody else, at least, are living their own private lives, and they're more religious, less religious, more, Jewishly involved, more assimilated. But they're doing their thing. But Esther, she's basically a prisoner in the palace. I don't want to say it's a very harsh way of saying it, but she's like a sex slave to the king. That's who she and what's her hope for redemption? And yet we're going to soon see how much she believes in God and how confident she is in the miracle that she does things that logically don't make sense, and you only can justify doing them if you have tremendous faith in God. Tremendous, not just faith, but trust in God. So now we know the background. Now we know the context of the story. And again, context is so important to appreciating the decisions that are made and the emotional journey that Esther has to go through. Okay. Haman comes to the king, convinces the king to write a decree to kill the Jewish people. Again, I'm not giving you a Purim class. I'm sure you all know the story. The king says, you got it, whatever you want. I'd be happy. You don't have to pay me. I'm happy for you to get rid of the Jewish people. Remember, Haman hated the Jews because he's from Amalek. Achashverosh hated the Jews because he sees that one day a Jew will take him over. He has a reason, at least. Okay? He gives him a signet ring, says you can write about the Jews whatever you want, and the decree goes out. Haman makes a lottery, and the lottery falls out. This is an important point, that the best day to kill the Jews, when the Jews have the least merit to earn spiritual protection, is on the 13th day of the month. Hence, 13 is a very superstitious number, because even according to his spiritual knowledge, 13 is a bad number for the Jews. In the month of Adar has no holidays for the Jews. It's a month when Moshe Rabbeinu passed away in that month, seemingly a month when our Redeemer of the past had also passed away. And again, was not getting too distracted. he sends out a letter to every single one of the 127 provinces under the kingdom of Achashverosh, stating that on the 13th of the month of Adar, the Jewish people are going to be killed. Do you know when this decree is written? On the 13th of the month of Nisan. Now, the dates are up to debate, and there's debate on the exact date. I'm going to keep it simple, sticking to one narrative the whole way through so you don't like different opinions, although I am acknowledging there are different opinions about the exact dates. But let's take the more general consensus and keep it simple without confusing you. 13th of Nisan, 2 days before Passover. Okay? If you know the Hebrew months, how long is it from the 13th of Nisan to the 13th of Adar? Exactly 11 months, just 1 month less than a year. It's 11 months. So there's 11 months because Nisan is the beginning of the Jewish year. Adar is the very last of the months of the Jewish year. And that was, he went through each and every month of the calendar. Each month had a different merit for the Jewish people. Each one. Again, I don't think get distracted with the whole lottery, but he came to the last month, and that was a month that he thought would be spiritually propitious to destroy the Jewish people. Now, when Haman made the decree, he didn't want anyone to know about it. Why not? He didn't want anyone changing the king's mind. So he sent out decrees, actually, sealed decrees, to each one of these 127 provinces. But according to the way the Talmud explains the story, the Jews didn't officially know about this yet. It wasn't public knowledge. It wasn't like, posted on the government websites, read out loud in Israel. The Knesset, they have to have like the first reading, the second hearing, the second reading, right? They didn't do any of that. It was passed in secret. However, Mordechai knew about this immediately. The text of the Megillah, and I on purpose didn't put text from the Megillah in the class because I will get so distracted on the text, but the text says, Mordechai yada eskol asher na'asa, which in Hebrew means Mordechai, he knew past tense. He knew everything that was taking place. How did he know? Prophetically. Either he had Ruach HaKodesh, or he had a dream, or Eliyahu Navi, Elijah the prophet, came to tell him. Okay? Gemara discusses exactly how he knew, but prophetically, spiritually, through Elijah the prophet, Mordechai finds out immediately about what is meant to happen, and he gets a copy of the actual decree. Now, Haman didn't send him a copy. So again, it says Eliyahu or Chavona, etc. Again, I'm staying focused on Esther, but he gets a copy of the actual decree immediately after it was signed. He's in Shushan. He's by the capital. There's no messengers involved. He immediately puts on sackcloth and ashes and begins to mourn. Now, Mordechai says, I need to go to Esther and tell Esther. You have to remember, as we discussed last week, that Mordechai prophetically understood that there was a reason why Esther had to be in the palace. That's why he allowed her to go. In the first place, he tried making a second beauty contest to see if there'd be a way for her to be released from the palace, and that didn't happen. And Mordechai understood that there's a reason why she's there. He didn't know what it was at the time, but he knew there was a reason why she was there. And he says to her, keep your identity secret till the time will come. And he knows this is the time. So he's not allowed to go into the palace wearing sackcloth and ashes. That was against the rules, against protocol. So he stands outside the palace gates wearing his sackcloth and ashes. And word gets to Esther that Mordechai is outside in sackcloth and ashes. So Esther sends a messenger whose name is Hassach, and I'll mention briefly who he is in a minute, with clothing for Mordechai and trying to understand exactly what's going on. Mordechai refuses the clothing, and instead he sends her a copy of this decree of Haman. Now, obviously, Haman didn't give it to Esther, but Esther now gets a copy of the decree from Mordechai that he had gotten through Elijah the prophet. She has this copy of the decree, and he says to her, you need to do something to help us. Esther sends back a message through Hassach that, I'm sorry, I can't help you. Why not? The king has not called me into his chambers in 30 days. And Haman had put a decree into place. And by the way, I don't want to get too distracted on, again, the history is very important. The Persians at that time had lost a big war. And there was a lot of anti-king sentiment in the streets of Shushan. Achashverosh was not a popular king for many reasons. Achashverosh knew he was not a popular king. In addition, Achashverosh, we know, was a very paranoid king, which is pretty typical for dictators. And the longer you're in power, the more paranoid you become. like they say, power corrupts, right? And absolute power corrupts absolutely. The more power you have, the more corrupt, the more paranoid he became. And he's living in almost isolation. And Haman, who had somehow gotten into the mind of Achashverosh, convinced Achashverosh not to trust anybody. So he made a rule that you cannot come to the king's private chambers unless the king called you. King invited you to come. Now, not only did the king have guards in his palace, in his chambers, protecting him, Haman put additional guards outside of the chambers to make sure that no one even came to the chambers of the king without his permission. Understand? There's a double layer of security around the king. I don't even know if the king knew about this second layer of security. So Haman had his own sons. Haman had many, many sons. 30 sons he maybe had. There's different groups of tens of sons that he had. He had many boys. And he has his own sons, his own personal henchmen that are loyal to him, guarding outside before anyone even comes to the actual inner chambers of the king. And so no one, including Achashverosh's own wife, is able to come to the king until the king calls them. So she says to Achashverosh, she says to Mordechai, I'm sorry, we're going to have to wait, but I have not been called to the king in 30 days. I can't go to the king. And so then Mordechai responds to her. And this time Mordechai responds to her with an extremely, extremely powerful verse where he says to her, this is your entire purpose of existence. You should know, he says to her, one of the most beautiful, in my very non-humble opinion, one of the most powerful verses in the entire Torah, the entire Bible, is this verse where Mordechai says to Esther that you have to go to the king. And he says to her, I'll just read you the verses, even though he says to her, if you're going to try and imagine in your mind that you're going to escape, don't think that you're going to escape living in the king's palace in secret. Her life wasn't in danger, just so you understand. No one knew she was Jewish. So she could have kept quiet. The 13th of Adar would come. All the Jews outside the palace would be killed. She probably could have even saved Mordechai by saying he's an advisor to the king and all that. And what would have happened to her? Nothing. No one knew she was Jewish. She wasn't listed on any Jewish roster or any form. She would have been saved. Says Mordechai to her, do not imagine you'll be able to escape in the king's palace with anyone else. Because if you're going to be silent, salvation will come to the Jewish people from somewhere else. And you and your father's house, who's your father's house? The house of King Saul. Yevedu will be destroyed, will perish. And then come the words, and who knows, if it was for this very moment, he died. La Malchus, you came to be the queen. The whole reason why you've been sitting in the palace for 7 years, married to this drunk ogre, is for this very moment. That's why you've been experiencing everything you've been experiencing. That's why you've been living through the hell you've been living through. For this moment where you will be able to save the Jewish people. And if you're going to try and run away from your destiny, not only are you denying your destiny, denying your purpose, you're going to fail. You and your father's house will perish, and God will find a different way to save the Jewish people. Don't give up the moment that you may have been created for. It's extremely powerful, extremely powerful. And then she says, fine, I'm going to go fast for 3 days. But before I get to that answer, I want to go back to Esther's original argument to Mordechai and how he answers her, okay? So let's go back now a little bit. When he says to her, I want you to go to the king, and I want you to defend, fight for the Jewish people. And she says, I can't. Why not? Because I haven't been called in 30 days. What is she saying to Mordechai? Is she saying, I'm not going to help the Jews? I'm hiding? Or is she just saying, wait for the king to call me? All she's saying is wait for the king. Don't push, don't react emotionally. And if you think about what she's saying to Mordechai, it's very logical. What Esther is saying is what the normal intellectual person would do. We got a problem. Okay, no doubt about it. And I'm acknowledging the problem, but we have 11 months. The decree is not till the 13th of the month of Adar. That's in 11 months from now. Let's strategize. Let's find a plan. Let's see what we can do to convince the king. Let's see if we can find a bribe. Let's see if we can undermine Haman. Let's make a plan. For me to run into the king's chambers, you know what the most likely outcome is? I'll be killed before I make it. I won't even get a chance. Haman's guards outside will kill me. And then the greatest opportunity we have is going to be lost. So she wasn't denying her responsibility to the Jewish people. This is very important. She's not denying her obligation to stand up for the Jews. All she's saying to Mordechai is, wait a little. Let's think about this. Let's be strategic. Let's analyze. Let's think this through in a smart way, and let's find a good plan that's not reckless. And what Mordechai was suggesting to her on a strategic level was reckless. It was dangerous. Just run in, and if you get killed, you're killed. Then what do we have? Then what are the Jews going to do? In addition, when we read the Megillah and we think of the fact that she's saying the king hasn't called me in 30 days, how do we normally understand that sentence? That the king is angry. I'm not going to be able to go to the king. Like the king doesn't like me. Right? That's most of us think that if your husband or a spouse hasn't spoken to you in 30 days, maybe some men might say, wow, amazing, a miracle. But God forbid. But it's most of us think that, well, that's a pretty lousy marriage, right? 30 days, they haven't talked to each other, they haven't been in the same room. Wow, But there's another perspective. Sometimes she's saying to Mordechai, it's already been 30 days. Any day he's going to call me. How long can my husband go without seeing his wife? How long can he go without, wanting some intimacy? I'm being polite. I'm standing in the shul. How long can it be until he misses me? Distance makes the heart grow fond. At some point, he's going to miss me. At some point, it's already 30 days. It's already a very long time that we haven't spoken. Wait. He's going to call me, and then I'll have an opportunity. He's going to want me. When the king calls me, he's going to call me because he's going to want me. I'm going to have a certain advantage. Instead, you're asking me, instead of waiting, like maybe 2 days, 3 days, a week, whatever will be told the king will call me, you're asking me to jump the gun, to recklessly go in when he hasn't called me. And we know how dangerous the king is when you do something he doesn't want. Again, remember, the last wife didn't do what he wanted, and he just killed her on the spot. There was no court case. There was no deliberation. He killed her while he was drunk, and on the way, he woke up in the morning. Like, what happened? But that's the way he is. And his fickleness and his paranoia only got worse from then. Didn't get better. So that's all she's saying to him. It's a good thing he hasn't called me 30 days. It's going to be any day now. So let's wait. Let me go to him when he calls me, when he's in a good mood, when he wants me. And then I'll speak to him. Makes sense, no? So what's Mordechai's answer to her? If that's the question, that's her argument, which is a perfectly logical argument, what's Mordechai responding? We're not talking about logic now. We're talking about salvation that God is going to do for the Jewish people. If you're going to try and give a logical strategies, strategically, it's not a good idea to go in now. But strategically, we have no chance. The only way that we are going to be saved is through God's salvation. And therefore, what we need to do is we need to act in what could almost seem like an illogical, reckless manner that will show how much we believe and trust in God to save us. That's what he's responding to her. When he says to her, who knows if for this moment you came to the kingdom, means there's not strategy here. It wasn't a strategy you should be the queen. God was setting this up. You're only a queen now because we planned it. You're a queen because we had a long-term vision of how we're going to protect ourselves from Haman. No. You're the queen because God had a plan for you to be the queen. To be the queen. So if we're relying on the fact that God is running the show and you're the queen because God made you the queen, then you got to put it all on God. Okay, you can when you rely on God, you have to make effort. There's a huge, I don't want to get too distracted in addressing the theological aspect here because I only have half hour and I have a lot I want to share tonight about the first feast and the second feast, but in like 2 minutes, because it's a very important point. There's a difference between hishtadlus, which means putting in effort, and placing your trust on the tool. Okay, without getting too distracted, when Yosef put his trust in the butler and asked the butler to remember him, he didn't just make effort. He convinced himself that was his solution. And so the reason why because theoretically you could say, why do anything? Why is she going to the king? Just wait, God will do a miracle. God will save the Jewish people. That's not a plan. To just sit and pray and fast and not make a plan of doing something is not what God wants. But to make your plan the answer, to make your plan the solution is also not what God wants. God wants you to do something, but it doesn't have to be a logical plan. It just has to be a vehicle through which God's blessings can manifest themselves. And therefore, she didn't have to think of the best strategy. She had to have the most trust in God and do something, which is entering the king's chambers, in order to allow the miracle of God to have a seemingly natural vehicle by which to express itself in our physical world. You understand what I'm saying? There's a strategy. There is a strategy. You're going to see. By the way, I'm going to share with you her strategy, okay?
She's very strategic. As a matter of fact, there's no other person that I recall that, except for David, that has employed strategy. Like she created the meeting with the king.
I'm going to soon tell you. Listen. I'm going to soon tell you just how politically strategic and how manipulative and psychologically brilliant Esther is. She's going to play Haman against Haman in the most brilliant ways possible. She's not going in blind, but she's going in with absolute faith in God. Because the problem is, let me explain to you the problem. One more minute. Here's the problem. When you start relying on your own logic too much, you start thinking too much, your own thought process can become your greatest enemy. You know how many people want to do something good, and then they start overthinking it. I'm guilty, and I know many people do this. We overthink our own. I'm inspired to do a mitzvah. I'm inspired to do something. But maybe today's not the best day, because tomorrow I'll have gotten a better night's sleep, so I'll be able to do it better. So, right? But we convince ourselves in spiritual language why really it will make more sense to wait tomorrow after I have a better breakfast because I didn't have a good night's sleep last night. Whatever it is, I'm just giving an example. And we start overthinking our inspiration, our commitments, and then instead of acting, we analyze. I know I'll do a mitzvah, but maybe I shouldn't ask him. Maybe I should wait for a bigger ask. Maybe I should wait for a better opportunity. Maybe I should this. Maybe I should that. And then we push it off. And once you push it off, it gets pushed off forever. What Mordechai is saying to Esther is, we need to make a plan. We need to do something. That's why he's demanding she does something. Go to the king. But do just enough to make a vehicle for God's miracle without overdoing the strategy. Don't overdo the mental thought process and where you try controlling the outcome. Do because you got to do, but also do because God put you there to do. And that's what Mordechai is saying to her. You're right, strategically, you're right, Esther. I don't disagree with your strategy. But you're not there because of strategy. You're only in the palace because God has a plan. So trust that God is going to protect you. Trust that God will bring you revach v'hatzala. God will bring you salvation and tremendous blessing. Do what you got to do. Make a vehicle for the miracles and go for it. And that's an argument that she can't argue with. That's what convinces her. It's not that Esther didn't know that she was a queen because God made her a queen before she spoke to Mordechai. She knew. She understood on her own quite well. She was a very smart woman, as you're going to soon see. She knew that she was in the palace because God put her there for this purpose. She understood that she's only there because God has a divine mission for her to save the Jewish people. But she thought, I need to strategize it. I need to analyze it. I need to make sure that it's a very, very brilliant plan. And Mordechai is telling her, you just need to trust in God. And when you trust in God, salvation will come. If you start thinking it too much, God will find other ways of doing the miracles. Okay? So, She says, I'm going to do it, but only on one condition. What's the condition? I want all of the Jewish people to fast. Why? Simply for a miracle. But if you pay attention to the words of the Megillah, she says, V'tzumu, and then those next word, alai. Fast upon me. Al teichlu al tishtu, don't eat and don't drink for 3 days. Day and night. And I too, my maids will also fast. Why is she saying, first of all, before I get to why, notice that she's also fasting. Which, by the way, if you're strategically planning to go seduce the king and convince him that you're the best wife and to keep you, you want to come in not fasting. Right? You want to come in well-fed, maybe a few l'chaim to help you, ease your nerves. You don't want to come in like after Tisha B'Av. You know what I'm saying? It's not very good.
Well, actually, there is some research on intermittent fasting. 3-day fast is really very good.
Okay, so I don't know if she had the data about 3-day fasting back then. Back then, they didn't believe that fasting was good for you. They believed they were really like, simple. You had food, you were healthy. You didn't have food, you were poor, and whatever. But fasting 3 days, in a logical perspective, will probably not be. Steve, next time he goes for a marathon, fast for 3 days. Let's see how well that goes, right? Like, yeah, that's a different thing. Oh, she don't know what she's going for. She's going to the king. You don't know what the king wants to do. Like, it takes energy. It's not like, anyway. The point is, she's going fasting, which means she's going not because she has a plan. She has a plan. I shouldn't say she's going with so much trust in Hashem that this is going to work out that she's not doing the logical method of preparing to go meet your husband. She's using the Jewish method of trusting in Hashem and utilizing the meeting with her husband as the vehicle through which God's miracles will take place. Okay. I really could discuss this more, but I want to go on. So she says, I want you to fast for me, and then I'm going to go in. Why does she need all the Jews to fast? She should fast. So obviously, simply, she wants blessings from God. But there's other reasons. The Talmud brings 3 reasons, which actually fits to the fact that she asked the Jews to fast for 3 days. Why 3-day fast? Aside for that on intermittent fasting, why else did she say 3-day fasting? So she was worried about 3 things. First of all, she's about to commit a terrible sin. I'm going to soon tell you how terrible the sin is. First of all, she's going to be drinking non-kosher wine at this feast, eating non-kosher food. She's making a feast, she herself ate seeds, so she ate vegetables, but she can't make a feast for the king and serve him pumpkin seeds. You know what I'm saying? It's not going to work. I don't think the king appreciated the vegan-free bird food. You know what I'm saying? Like, maybe today you convince him it's going to be a healthy experience. Back then, I'm sure the king's here for a feast. He wants a good piece of steak. So first of all, she's going to have non-kosher at this feast. Second of all, worse, she's going to be willingly inviting the king to be intimate with her, which is going to ruin the marriage. And I'm going to get back to this in a few minutes. And it's a terrible sin. And she's carrying all of this guilt of what she knows she's about to do. She has to do it to save the Jewish people, but she feels guilty about it. Secondly, she understood that why did the Jewish people end up in this situation to begin with? The Jewish people in this situation where seemingly God has abandoned them and hidden his face from them and allowed them to feel like God is no longer existent and they're at the mercy of their new masters in Persia, because the 70 years of the prophecy from Jeremiah have passed and there's been no redemption at all. The temple project has been stopped. Israel is desolate. There's no Jews living in the land of Israel at all. It's swampland. Why did God allow them to feel this way?
Assimilation.
The assimilation, but more specifically, because they ate at the feast of Achashverosh. And Mordechai warned them not to. And because they ate at the feast of Achashverosh, they separated themselves from their protector. In fact, I don't know if it's a Talmud or the Medrash, I don't remember now, it says an example, a parable of the shepherd that the sheep chased away the shepherd. And after the shepherd left, then the wolf came to eat the sheep. And the sheep said, who's protecting us? Where's the shepherd? When you chase away the shepherd, then the wolves will come devour you because there's no one to protect you. So too the sheep, which is the Jewish people, who chased away God, And so now we're sitting we're exposed. We're spiritually vulnerable. We've lost our divine protection because we've eaten from the food, the non-kosher food of Achashverosh, served on the dishes of the temple, and that act of assimilation and lack of trust in Hashem made us vulnerable to be under the control of the nations. And therefore, what do the Jews need as an antidote to this eating of the feast of Achashverosh? The fast. The fast would be the antidote for the Jewish people. Aside for her fasting for her own spiritual merit, it would be an antidote to the fact that they'd eaten from the feast of Achashverosh. There's a third reason why she asks them to fast. I told you that the messenger that she had sent to go to Mordechai with the clean clothing and the one that he sent back to her was a man called Hasach. That was his name in the Megillah. But then the last time when Mordechai sends back a message to her saying that if you want the salvation to come to the Jewish people no matter what, then you have to, this is your moment that you were there for, it no longer says that he sent Hasach. It just says they related Esther's words to Mordechai and he responded without saying who was a messenger. What happened to Hasach? In the beginning it says she sent Hasach, he sent Hasach. Then it says they told the words to Mordechai without giving a name. What happened to the messenger? Hama, says the Talmud, had spies everywhere. That's the way it worked back then. I mean, still today. Like today you have Big Brother watching, then there was Big Haman watching. And he had spies everywhere. And he sees a messenger going back and forth between Esther and Mordechai. He didn't know what the messenger said, but he saw he already got suspicious, and he had this messenger killed. And so when the messenger left Esther to go to Mordechai, he was killed. Now, who was this messenger? There's different opinions about this. But there's one opinion in the Gemara that says that Hasach is Daniel the prophet. Daniel, the advisor of the king, who had permission to be in the palace, who was kind of a neutral party because he was an advisor that was a carryover from the previous kingdom. He wasn't Esther's advisor. He was an advisor of Belshazzar and of the other kings before Achashverosh. He was still in the palace. And he was the one that both Esther and Mordechai trusted to be their secret agent. He knew who Esther really was. He kept it a secret, obviously, but he was a secret agent that was able to go in and out of the palace and give the word of Esther to Mordechai. And when he and Haman's agents, maybe they didn't even know he was going to Esther, but they saw Daniel talking to Mordechai, and they killed him. They killed him. Now, there is an opinion that says it's not Daniel because later on we see Daniel is alive in the times of Daryavish, the son of Esther. So it's not so clear. There's a opinion that says it can't be Daniel. But according to one opinion, Hasach is Daniel. And Esther's carrying this guilt that Daniel the prophet was assassinated because she was using him for messages. And so she has this additional guilt on her that the prophet was assassinated because of her. Which, by the way, adds to the feeling of abandonment that she could have felt at that moment. If Esther wanted to justify a feeling of abandonment by God and to justify saying, I'm going to lay low and hide my identity because God has hidden his identity and God is not standing up to defend the Jewish people. Look what he's done after the 70 years passed. Achashverosh went to party. He did nothing to defend his glory and allow the whole world to think that he's dead. So I'm going to also hide my identity. She would have been even more justified after the prophet Daniel was killed by Haman's men for giving over a message from Mordechai. But she doesn't do that. She doesn't give in to despair. She doesn't give in to being afraid. She stays strong. And that's why she says, fast for me. Number one, because you're going to eat non-kosher. Number two, because the Jews need to fix the eating of the feast, Achashverosh. Number three, because of the death of her messenger, which was Hasach, who some opinions in the Talmud say was actually the prophet Daniel. But there's one more thing. She's now committed to doing what Mordechai told her. What did Mordechai tell her to do? To willingly present herself to the king. Now, willingly presenting yourself to the king means that you're not being raped, you're now basically committing adultery, which would mean she's no longer allowed to live with her husband Mordechai ever again in her life. But if you think about it, and until a few days ago, I never ever thought about this before. there's a very famous rule in Judaism, very famous rule, which is that whenever your life is in danger, you're allowed to violate a sin to save your life, correct? You're allowed to eat non-kosher to save your life. But there's 3 exceptions that you're not allowed to give up, you're not allowed to violate, even if your life is in danger, you need to be willing to violate your life for them. What are those 3 mitzvos? The person should be killed rather than transgress. Yeah, that's right. Murder, idol worship, and adultery. You are not allowed to willingly commit adultery even if your life is in danger. Which means that every time that Esther was being raped by the king, rape is not by choice. She doesn't have to be willing. You don't have to give up your life to avoid being raped. If a person is being raped, they're allowed to be raped, and they don't have to. The person puts a gun to their head, God forbid. By Jewish law, they're allowed to allow themselves to be raped, to not be killed. But this wasn't going to be rape. Now she was going to commit what could be considered adultery.
Could be or is.
Well, it is. Although some will say she did it, it was also considered forced. So therefore, there is an opinion. You're more that opinion. There is an opinion in the Talmud that says that she was allowed to stay married to Mordechai even after this, because even this act, although she did it willingly, it wasn't willingly, she was forced because of the decree. It wasn't.
It's not like she enjoyed it.
She didn't enjoy it. It wasn't out of enjoyment, but she's doing it on her own initiative.
It's a force.
Is enjoyment part of the?
Yeah, enjoyment is part of it. It's willing. But here's what, yeah.
I have a question for you. You say that in the beginning that Esther was married with his uncle.
You're married with Mordechai, correct. Mordechai and Esther are married.
But they were divorced?
No, they're not divorced. It says in the verse in the Megillah, Vatihila Libas, that she became like a daughter, and the Talmud says, not Libas, but Libayis, for a house, for the house. But let me say, I'm never going to finish. So let's stay focused. Which means, although again, there is an opinion, everything has multiple opinions. There is an opinion that even this act of intimacy with Achashverosh was against her will and was not considered an act of adultery, and she was still permitted to be with Mordechai later on in her life. However, the simple perspective would be that she's now offering herself to the king. And if that's the case, not only is she giving up on Mordechai, not only is she risking her life to go into the king when she hadn't been called by the king, which may lead to her death, she's also possibly giving up her portion in the world to come. She's giving up Olam Haba because she's committing a sin for which she's not allowed to commit. Why is she doing it? Because Mordechai told her. And the Jew needs to follow the rabbi says, and Mordechai was the rabbi of the generation. He was her Moshe, her rabbi, and he said to her, you have no choice, you have to. And so she accepted with complete, absolute emunah and complete faith what Mordechai said she was going to do. And she recognized this was an unusual situation for the sake of saving all of Klal Yisrael. And there's actually a source. This rabbi gave me a whole thing that Shaul HaMelech, King Saul, when he committed, so to say, suicide. If you know the whole story, and if you don't know the story, then for another time. But he fell on his sword and killed himself instead of being conquered by the Plishtim, which for the same reason, to protect that other Jews shouldn't come to try and save him. They would also be killed. So to save other Jews, it wasn't like to save his own life that he was committing suicide. It was to save other Jews. And so what Esther was doing at this moment, like her great-great-grandfather, King Saul, was not only risking her life physically, not only giving up her emotional bond and connection to Mordechai, she's even possibly giving up her life spiritually. And that's what it means when it says in the Megillah, when she says to Mordechai, I accept upon myself to go into the palace, which means, and if I will perish, I will perish. She says it twice. I'm willing to die in the physical world, and I'm willing to die in the spiritual world. Not only am I willing to risk my life walking into the king's chamber unannounced, uninvited, and possibly being killed in this world, I'm even willing to risk my life to perhaps be killed in the world to come by doing something that classic Judaism would not endorse. But recognizing the extreme danger of the time and my obligation to do what God put me in position here to do, to try and save all of the Jewish people, I'm willing to doubly die. To perish not once, but to perish twice. to try and save the Jewish people. Isn't that a sacrifice?
Yes.
Amazing, yeah.
If this was part of God's plan, then why would she be forfeiting her future in the world to come?
Well, she didn't forfeit her future in the world to come. She gets a beautiful, in her mind, she doesn't know. She doesn't know. You have hindsight. We're sitting here, 2020, we know the end of the story. But in the moment, she doesn't know what's going to happen. At that moment, you have to understand the enormity of the decision that she's making. There's everything going against her. God is hidden. The Jews are abandoned. The Jews are forgotten. And she could escape. And not only is she willing to risk her life physically, when logically she could have a very, very good logical argument, say, let's wait a few days, give it a week, let me do some research, let's find out what happened, why did the king sign the decree, how could we change it, let me wait for the king to call me. She throws logic aside. She throws any sense of self-preservation to protect her own physical life to the side, and she even throws aside her own spiritual soul preservation, risking her spiritual identity to allow herself to perhaps lose her portion of the world to come, to perish in the next world, to try and save the Jewish people. This is heroism. This is what it means to sacrifice literally everything. Literally sacrifice everything for the sake of the Jewish people. Okay. Yeah. So, the entire Jewish nation began to fast for 3 days. And again, there's different opinions what the 3 days are. Some say it was a Thursday, Monday, Bahab, if you know what that is. Beis, hey, Beis, Monday, Thursday, because fast 3 days is hard. Some say it was 3 days, the 14th, the 15th, and the 16th. I think the 13th, 14th, 15th. But the classic, simple consensus is it was the 14th, day before Pesach, when you're supposed to have the Korban Pesach, the 15th, and the 16th. And she went in on the third day, but it was the third day from the decree, which was the second day of the fast. Again, there's different opinions. But let's say this is the way it is. So they're fasting on the 14th, on the 15th, which means that they don't eat matzah on the night of the Seder, which is another fascinating discussion. How could the Jews not eat matzah on Pesach? Mordechai, I gotta tell you one thing, Mordechai didn't want to agree to her. One of the, again, there's so much to share. Mordechai had to recognize Esther was a bigger prophetess than he was a prophet. Because Mordechai said, she said, we're going to fast for 3 days, day and night, you're not going to eat matzah. And Mordechai said, what do we not eat matzah? It's a Seder. You're not going to have a Seder? And she said, what use does it help to have the Torah and to have a Seder if you don't have the Jewish people? Those were her words were, what use is the mitzvot without the Jewish people to do them? So if you eat Pesach this year, but we don't fast and earn God's merit, next year there won't be any Jews eating any matzah anywhere. Better to miss this year to ensure the future. Mordechai accepted the whole discussion amongst commentaries. How did they not eat matzah? Maybe they ate after dark. They ate maybe less than the kazayis. So they ate matzah, but not enough to be considered breaking the fast, but they ate enough to eat matzah. They ate a kazayis, not a kibetza, which is an egg's amount. There's different measures of olive, of an egg. Whatever, different opinions, different explanations. How did the Jews not eat matzah that year? Whatever it is. But Vinishvi, whatever it is, again, we wouldn't stay focused on Esther here. It's the first night of Pesach, night of the Seder. And she is fasting ready for 2 days. It's now going into the third day of the fast. And she comes, she dresses up. She did not break her fast, but she obviously had to get dressed. You can't come to the king in sackcloth and ashes, obviously. Someone asked them about what's sackcloth. Sackcloth is like a very rough material where a person's in fasting in the morning. They wear like very coarse material. They put ashes on their forehead as a sign of mourning. She dresses up. There's a Yalkut Me'am Lois. I think our Medrash describes all the clothing she wore. Each garment was a more beautiful garment from a different place. Jewelry, stones, crown, she was dressed like a queen. She has all of her maids with her. The maids are very loyal to her because they're also walking and they could also get killed. And she's fasting. And it says her face was green, but her face was shining with a tremendous glow and a tremendous beauty. And she starts walking from her chambers to the private chamber of the king. As you can imagine, she's afraid. She's afraid. There's a lot to share, but I only have a few minutes, and I want to get to the second night too. So we'll go straight to the point. She's praying to Hashem, and she comes with a confidence, and she comes to the first set of guards, Haman's guards, who are meant to kill anyone that comes without permission before they even get into the king's chambers. But she walks right past them like she's a queen, with such royal grace and such, she didn't stop, with such, confidence, and that they were so shocked to see somebody like, they're a guard that no one comes without permission. No one's, they're like, the guard by my development in the middle of the night. They're bored, they're sleeping, right? She walks right through the guard. They were so shocked, they didn't have a chance to do anything. By the time they collected themselves, she had already walked past them towards the actual door of the chamber where the inner guards are. The guards on the inside see Esther coming, and they're getting ready to kill her. And she walks into the room of Tumah so that the presence left her. She says, Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani. She says a verse of God, why did you abandon me this moment? Achashverosh, at first glance, sees her and gets very angry. It says in the Gemara, he got so angry, he was grinding his teeth together in anger. He was thinking, my first wife, I told her to come, and she didn't listen to me. This wife, I didn't tell her to come, and she's coming anyway. At that moment, he's about to express his anger. As the guards already saw the anger on the king's face, they're already getting ready to kill her and divide her jewelry. At that moment, the angel came and lifted the scepter in his hand, and he pointed towards Achashverosh. The devil slapped him, maybe, if I remember. I didn't look at this Gemara now. He slapped him, if I'm not mistaken. Whatever. Either way, his scepter lifted up. The guards, he lifted his scepter. At that moment, the tremendous feeling of love for her overcomes him. It says that there were 3 angels, if I remember correctly. There were 3 angels that were present from that came. One to hold, she actually fainted. At the moment when Achashverosh began grinding his teeth and looked at her with anger, he was grinding his teeth, she said, my God, why have you forsaken me? She actually started to collapse. She was weak from fasting. So it says one angel came to hold her up. One angel came to put a necklace of grace on her neck to shine beauty. And one came to force the king to greet her. And the king saw her now with this grace of the angels, and he looks, and all of a sudden a tremendous feeling of love and pity for her overcomes. He sees how afraid she is. And she's obviously very afraid. She almost fainted. He says, my beautiful queen, what are you doing here? Ad chatzi hamalchus v'tinasim lach. Up to half the kingdom, and I'll give it to you, which is a very strange thing. I can go for another hour now, literally, about what half a kingdom. Half a kingdom, if you look at the map of the globe, Israel's right in the half of the kingdom mark between where they were. The halfway mark is the land of Israel. So you got for anything but Jerusalem. Either way, she already got a hint. Said, I'll give it to you. Meaning, I won't do, if you want something personal, you want money, I'll give it to you. If you want anything governmentally, that it's a personal. Either way, she wasn't planning on asking him right then and there. She didn't feel like she had the right moment. Obviously, she had already prepared the feast before. She says to the king, I want you and Haman to come to a private feast that I want to make for you, and there I'll tell you what it is that I want. Okay? He says, no problem. The king, he's being invited to a party. I imagine Achashverosh was kind of lonely. He was paranoid. I mean, if he hadn't seen his wife in 30 days, he couldn't be that busy. He wasn't. Haman was running the kingdom, so he's probably bored. He says, okay, call Haman. We're going to a party, and they come to the party. And they come to the party, and of course, the famous question is, why does she invite Haman to this party? Why does she invite Haman to the party? After all, who did she? Well, I'm going to ask. Let me explain the question for a second. Who does she need to convince? Haman? Haman's not going to agree to rescind his decree against the Jewish people. That's never going to happen. The one she needs to convince is Achashverosh. And if anything, it's easier to convince him without Haman around. Haman's not going to help her cause. So why is she inviting her enemy to her own party? She's invite just the king and nobody else. So the Gemara in Megillah 15b actually gives not 1, not 2, not 3, but 12 different answers to this question from 12 different rabbis explaining why Esther invited Haman to this party with the king. Not going to go through all 12. I'm not looked at all 12.
That's they saw the Godfather. Keep your enemies close.
Exactly. That's one of the reasons given. One of the reasons is that she knew that I have to keep my enemy close to me. Not only to keep him close, but to lift him up. Because before the enemy will fall, you raise them high, then they'll fall down. By the way, I'll tell you a few of the answers. I'll tell you 5. She had 5 targets in mind when she invites Haman to this party. She wants to influence Hashem. One of the reasons given is that when she invites the king to the Haman to the party, she's causing an ayin hara on Haman, an evil eye. Because people talk, why is he being invited to the thing? And Hashem, look, is Haman deserving of this closeness? Whenever it says Hamelech in the Megillah, it's a reference to Hashem. And so the king's being invited, Hashem understands Haman, so Haman should be judged more carefully if he's deserving of this honor, if he found not worthy. In addition, it was to stir jealousy and suspicion amongst the other servants of the king, which again caused an ayin hara, an evil eye. Other rabbis explain that Esther knew that Achashverosh was an impulsive person, that he acts impulsively and he easily changes his mind, and therefore she wanted Haman to be there, that if she could succeed in convincing Achashverosh to kill Haman, should happen in the second, which is what happens, by the way, before he has a chance to change his mind, like when he killed Vashti. It happened so fast. So she wants Haman to be ready that God will do a miracle, should happen out of chance for Haman, Achashverosh to change his mind. She wants that Haman shouldn't have a chance to devise a strategy to defend himself. If Achashverosh is not going to care, I'm going to kill Haman, but Haman's not around, Haman will find out there's a decree against him. He'll do a bribe, he'll do something else, he'll escape, he'll find a different, reverse strategy. Haman was very, very cunning, very smart. Also explains, as you said, she wanted to keep her enemy close, to lift him up. It says when wicked people drink, bad things happen. She wanted to get Haman drunk, Achashverosh drunk, because that'll bring the bad things. She said, let me keep him close to me and see if I can slip him up. Because this way she didn't know exactly what's going to happen. She was waiting for Hashem to do the miracle. So she said, if I keep him close, at some point he'll say something wrong, and that will get Achashverosh upset, and I'll be able to have the opportunity to pounce when he makes a mistake. But ultimately, again, they're all true, by the way. Just I want to tell you that the Gemara says, after bringing all 12 different opinions, so it says that Rabbi Bar Avuha was a great rabbi in the Talmud, met Eliyahu Hanavi. And he asked Eliyahu Hanavi, which of these 12 answers is correct? What was she thinking? Was she thinking about the minister? Was she thinking about Haman? I'm going to tell you about Haman in a second. Which one was it? And Eliyahu Hanavi said they're all correct. She thought of all 12 strategies. She thought of a strategy how to make an ayin hara on him. She thought of a strategy how to make the officers jealous. She thought of a strategy how to make Achashverosh jealous. She thought of Achashverosh how to make God have an ayin hara. She thought of a strategy how to make him drunk, so he'll make a mistake. He should be close. There'll be opportunity to kill him. It should happen right away. But ultimately, they're all correct. But the one that you're going to see play out the most is she wants to make Haman, two things I'm going to talk to you about. Haman's ego soar high. Because the wicked, before they fall, they go high, and that's the cause of their downfall. And she wants to make Achashverosh jealous and paranoid of Haman. Here you can see she's a very wise woman, Esther. Very wise and very strategic. She's very, very strategic. So she brings them together, and she brings them there. And what does she do? At the party, she's serving wine to, she herself is serving. She said, I'm not going to drink. I'm going to serve you like a servant, which I guess was arousing their excitement. And she didn't drink, but she served Haman. She served Achashverosh. And the queen, was serving Haman. Now, what does this do? So the two things. It made Haman soar high. The Gemara quotes a verse from Avadia. The prophet Avadia says, if you go up high like an eagle, from there I will bring you down, so says the Lord, right? His ego had never been as high as it was at that first feast when the queen herself is serving him wine. And she wasn't just serving him wine. I want to be polite how I speak it, but she was deliberately doing it in a way that will make him excited. She was doing it in a way that would make him think that Esther, one of the other reasons in the Gemara is to remove, I missed two reasons in the Gemara, two important reasons. One was to remove suspicion on her. Because Haman didn't know who she was. But Haman was suspicious. There's no way that Esther and Haman were friends before this party. So the best way to remove any suspicion on you is to invite your enemy to a party. He's not going to suspect you of being an enemy when you invite you. And the other thing is, I forgot one very important explanation in the Gemara. Esther knew that the Jews were kind of counting on Esther to be their salvation. They knew, we have a queen. Look, we have political connections. We have connections in high places. When the rumor got out very quickly that Esther invited the king and Haman to a private party. What do you think they were saying in synagogue the next morning when some guy came into shul? Do you know who Esther had in her house last night? Haman. She's abandoning us. This self-hating Jew, this self-hating Jewish traitor. Can you imagine? She's trying to skirt her responsibility as a Jew, and she's trying to get on the good side of our enemy to save herself and save her own skin. She's abandoned us and sold us to the devil. She's a self-hating Jew. And that would make the Jews realize that their only salvation is not going to come through a human being. It's not going to come through their political connections. But where will their salvation come from? Only from Hashem. And then they would finally pray, not with the thought of Esther being their salvation in the back of their mind, but then they would really pray knowing that God is the only one that can save us. So she invites Haman to the party, and the Jews are going to hear about this because everyone was talking about it. All the officers were talking about it. Everyone, they knew. And they said, okay, Esther abandoned us. We have no hope now. If you have no hope, then you really pray. So, and back to what we're saying. So she's at the party, and she's serving Haman, and she's serving Achashverosh. And as she's serving, and she's doing it in a way that will make Haman very excited, and it will make Achashverosh very jealous. Now, Haman had in his mind the plan to assassinate the king. Haman didn't really like the king very much. He worked his way up, and one day Haman wants to be the king. He wanted to wear the crown when he came in the night before. We're going to get to that soon if we have time. He wanted to be the king. That was his plan. That was his. So he has no choice. And now he's the king. He wants to kill the king. And all of a sudden, something he had never thought of, like almost lands in his lap. Esther is in love with me. Esther wants me. Esther thinks I'm the future. Esther recognizes that her husband's a doofus and a moron, and she realizes that I'm the future. And at that moment, Haman begins to think, I'm going to marry Esther. I'm going to kill the king, and Esther will be my queen. And she'll help me in this assassination plot. Like a whole new opportunity comes into his mind. I mean, she fooled him so good. So good. But now Haman is all over Esther. He thinks he has a future wife here. So there's this chemistry going on. This chemistry, she's faking it. But this drunk Haman is busy drinking the strong wine that Esther is feeding him. He's responding. And Achashverosh is sitting there and he is beginning to seethe. His jealousy is getting worse and worse by the second. So what does he do? He drinks. And what does Haman do? He drinks. He's drinking because he's on a high. And Achashverosh is drinking because he's very angry. And there's one more detail I didn't tell you. When Haman, then what happens? Then Esther says to Achashverosh, she said, what do you want? Like he's getting nervous. Like, what's going on here? What's this party for? What do you want? Until half the kingdom, I'm going to give it to you. What do you want? You know what she says? She says, I want to do another party. Come another night. But you can't just say come another night. For what purpose? Just tell me what you want now. Like, why are you waiting another party? So she says to Achashverosh as follows. Tomorrow night, I will give you what you've always been waiting for. What's he always been waiting for? To find out your identity, to find out who you are. Do me a favor and plug this in because the battery's low. There's an extension cord right over there. Thank you. Tomorrow night, I am going to tell you who I am, what my identity is. I'm going to tell you who I am. Now, he's very excited about that. But then what does she say? Who do I want to come to this party tomorrow? You and Haman. And tomorrow, she says them like an equal. And tomorrow, I'll do for both of you a party. Meaning at that moment, she's saying to Achashverosh, I'm going to tell you who I am. I'm not going to tell you in private. I'm going to give you what you've been waiting for the last 7 years. Thank you. I'm going to give it to you together with Haman there. What is Haman doing there? When earlier that day, Achashverosh said when Esther said to Achashverosh, I want Haman to come to the party. He understood why is she inviting Haman to the party. She wants money. She wants capital. She wants, So who's going to make it happen? Haman. Haman's the chief of staff. He's the treasurer. So you want the chief of staff to make, okay, he understood. But now at the party, he's saying to her, I'm going to divulge to you something deeply personal. Something I've never told you in all of our years of marriage, no matter how hard you've tried. And when will I tell it to you? With Haman there. This was like major red flags. Like every warning bell, every siren went off in his head at that moment. And it should. And it was deliberate. It was a strategy. I was like, Esther was brilliant. What Esther does at this party, how she manipulates both of these egomaniacs, how she is able to stoke the paranoia and jealousy of Achashverosh, and to stoke the ego and the fantasies of Haman, both in the same party. Brilliant. It's brilliant. If you understand this story, I mean, you've never read the Megillah like this, but this is what's going on at the party. These two egomaniacs are both drinking like crazy because one's ego is flying high and one's jealousy and paranoia is flying high. And they're feeding off each other. So Achashverosh leaves. He's very angry. He's very nervous. Very, very nervous. In fact, the Gemara says, the Megillah says he couldn't sleep that night.
But I don't understand. You could have just said, no, he's the king. You can say, no, you
But
want
he
to
wanted to find out what it was.
without Haman or whatever.
Okay, you're right. He could have. He could have. I guess, first of all, it's a good question. Why did he just not say, Haman's not invited? This is going to be between me and you. I guess he was afraid he wouldn't look it in the eyes of Haman. Now. If you say that, looks like a very jealous son. He didn't know how to say to Haman, you're not invited to the party, Haman, after my wife invited you. You know, that would be kind of hard to do. And he wasn't that strong of a person. And Haman was like, had him, Haman had him under his control. So he didn't know how to say to Haman no. But in the inside, it was bothering him. And it made him realize how little control he had that he couldn't even say no to Haman. You understand what's going on? So Haman walks out of the party on cloud 18. On cloud 9 is an understatement. He walks out like he in his mind, he's convinced he's going to soon kill the king and marry the queen and become the new king. There's nothing that can stop him. And Achashverosh goes to his bed and he's tossing and turning in anxiety and in jealousy and in paranoia. What is the plan? And he's convinced that Esther and Haman are planning against him.
There was a thing I heard about Achashverosh why he didn't invite Haman. He didn't want to look again like the confused king because they know what he's doing.
Okay. I want to tell you something else. You want to see how much Esther risks her life, though. By doing what she did was very dangerous. Because Achashverosh could have just killed them both. Yeah. By making it look like she was plotting together with Haman. Haman wasn't smart enough to realize I should be careful. This is something, he fell for hook, line, and sinker. She played him so good. But she was taking a tremendous risk. Because if Achashverosh would have decided that night, that's it, I'm killing them both, she would have been killed. Now, she was willing to do it. Why was she willing to do it? Because even if she gets killed, but Haman also gets killed, it's still worth it. She's happy to do that. So she was willing to take that risk. But as you see once again, you see the unbelievable sacrifice of Esther being willing to perhaps be killed with Haman and have everyone, not just that she would die with Haman, what would everyone say about her? She betrayed the Jews and she was in bed with Haman. She could have not only been killed that night together with Haman by the king, she could have been accused by all the Jews as a traitor, as someone who was not loyal to the Jewish people. And she was willing to risk that shame, those rumors, for the chance of maybe allowing Haman to be killed. Bruce, you have you're bleeding over there. You're bleeding out. Understand? Tremendous, tremendous act of sacrifice that she was willing to take. Okay, so what happens that night? I don't know if I should stop here. It's like, don't stop. I have another class, but So what happens that night? Just a little bit more. The second feast will be for tomorrow, but I'll tell you what happened that night. Two things happened that night. The first thing that happens that night is Haman walks out of the palace, and what does he see? Mordechai. Mordechai's hanging around the palace to see what's happening. He's very curious to see what happened, right? So Mordechai's hanging around, and we know that there was a rule that everyone had to bow down to Haman, except for Mordechai didn't bow down because he had bought Haman as a slave many years before, but that's not for tonight. So Mordechai won't bow down. And all of a sudden, for all of Haman's genius and planning, up until this moment, everything Haman had done had been cold, methodical, thought out, with a plan, with a strategy, with a calculation. He already wanted to kill Mordechai before, but he says, I can't just kill Mordechai by himself. I'm going to kill all the Jews, and I'll kill Mordechai with the Jews. And now his own plan out the window. He sees Mordechai not bowing down, and now his ego is so high, he can't hold it in. He can't wait to kill Mordechai and all the Jews. He says, I'm going to kill Mordechai tonight. I'm going to kill him right now. And this is the beginning of his downfall. Because he could have just killed Mordechai. Mordechai is an advisor to the king. You can't just go kill an advisor to the king because you don't like him, because he won't bow down to you. And Haman knew this. If Haman would have been thinking logically, which he had been in the past, he would have said, patience, plan your next move. That's who Haman was. He was a cunning planner. He wasn't normally impulsive like this. But she got him so high, he couldn't contain himself. And what happened? He said, I'm going to go home. He asked them, what should I do? And they tell him, so I said, build the gallows for Mordechai tonight. And he goes that night to build gallows for Mordechai. And now that he goes in the middle of the night to go and ask the king permission, which is going to be part of his downfall. He can't even wait till the morning. That's one thing that happens. And the second thing that happens at night, it says, Balaylahu, that night the king couldn't sleep. Why couldn't the king sleep? Because he thought there's someone that's trying to kill me. My wife is trying to kill me, my most trusted advisor. But he said, someone in the palace will tell me. They know that I will reward them for telling me about the plot. But he said, maybe they think I won't reward them. Was there ever a time that somebody saved my life and I didn't reward them? So he has his servants bring in the book of Chronicles to go look and see if there's ever another time when there had been an assassination attempt on the king and he hadn't rewarded those that had tried to assassinate him. And what do they tell them in the book? Yeah, there was two men, Bixen and Saresh, and they wanted to kill you. And the one that found out the plot was Mordechai. And Mordechai actually told Esther, who told you. And what did the king do? Nothing. And now the king is convinced, I need to reward Mordechai tomorrow morning, before the next feast. Because the next feast, he's already convinced tomorrow that they're going to kill him. They're going to gang up on him and kill him. Who knows what's going to happen to this feast with them together? Already in the morning, I need to show all my servants that I reward those that tell me if any plot's against me. So if there's any plot, to come and tell me. And that, my friends, will stop there for tonight. Even though there's a lot more to say. I'm sorry. We'll stop there. You'll all come back next Tuesday, next Monday, Bezrat Hashem. Bezrat Hashem, you'll all come back. And then I'll tell you what happened the next day. Bezrat Hashem. I guess 9:20. I actually have a meeting at 9:30, a Zoom meeting. So, okay. Thank you all who enjoyed the class. Laila tov, my friends. Yes, Baruch Hashem. So much, huh? There's so much. Yeah. Still, okay, anyway, good night, everyone that's watching. Good night, Michael. Good night, Linda. Good night, David Alexson. Good night, Monica. Esther's story is one of my favorites, too. Absolutely. Gail, Laila Tov, Gail. Stephanie, don't say no. Next week, Bezat Hashem, Stephanie will come back. And you'll hear the story is not over. Thank you, Karine. Thank you, Andrea. Thank you, Shira. Thank you. Okay, Laila Tov, everybody. Thank you so much. Jillian, we've never been so sad for a class to be over. Listen, I have a meeting at 9:30. We've got to say goodnight. It's okay. Well, it's not. It's just temporarily paused until just hitting the pause button for a week. Okay. Got to hide my identity. That's a journey, Stephanie. Okay, Laila Tov, my friends. See you all next week. Nana, I hope you enjoyed. Thank you. Okay. Say good night to you all. Jillian, I'm glad you enjoyed. Next week, same time, same